this girl, Margot Roth Spiegelman, is adored by her next-door neighbor, this kid, Quentin Jacobson. And later in the book, Quentin finally has to realize, he says at one point, like, Margot was not a fine and precious thing. She was a girl. He realizes that eventually, but he doesn't realize it to start. This is the beginning of the novel. The way I figure it, everyone gets a miracle. Like, I will probably never be struck by lightning, or win a Nobel Prize, or become the dictator of a small nation in the Pacific Islands, or contract terminal ear cancer. Side note on that, the first draft of the book, that was terminal eye cancer. And like, I'd like to think that like all the choices in my novels have like sort of good, solid literary reasoning behind them. But shortly after I wrote that line about terminal eye cancer, longtime fans of the video blog will know this, I developed a very serious infection behind my eye that almost reached my brain. And I had to be hospitalized for like a week and a half. And the first thing I did when I got home was change that to ear cancer, because I worried that I was like tempting fate. I did recently have an ear infection. Anyway. Or contract terminal ear cancer, or spontaneously combust. But if you consider all the unlikely things together, at least one of them will probably happen to each of us. I could have seen it rain frogs. I could have stepped foot on Mars. I could have been eaten by a whale. I could have married the Queen of England, or survived months at sea. But my miracle was different. My miracle was this. Out of all the houses, in all the subdivisions, in all of Florida, I ended up living next door to Margot Roth Spiegelman. So that's the beginning of Papertowns, when he still thinks of Margot as his miracle. And then over time, he has to learn to think of her as a human being. And that was really the initial inspiration for writing Papertowns. It was not only being troubled by the Edward Cullenization of the romantic other, but also being troubled by the way that boys are always imagining girls as being more than human, and how in a way that's an objectification of women that is as troubling as the dehumanization of women. So that was the initial inspiration for Papertowns. I want to say one thing about the title, because I know a lot of people have read the book, and if you haven't, this is a bit of a spoiler. But since I don't really believe in spoilers, it doesn't actually count. Like, I believe in spoilers for Harry Potter or for Twilight. Like, if a book has an idea, like a premise, like Wizard School, or Vampires in Suburbia, or whatever it is, like, then you can spoil it. But like, nothing really happens in my books, you know? Well, like, nothing happens in a lot of books I love. Like, what's the premise of Catcher in the Rye, you know? Like, a guy gets kicked out of boarding school and walks around New York for 2 days? That book sounds horrible. But it turns out to be brilliant, and I don't think it spoils the brilliance in any way to say that Holden's red hunting cap is the same color as his dead brother's hair. So the title Papertowns is, there are three parts of the novel. The first part is called The Strings, the second part is called The Grass, and the third part is called The Vessel. And in each of those three parts, the characters have kind of a different reading of the idea of Papertowns. In the first part, they think it represents Orlando, this place that's so flimsy and lame, that was sort of built all at once and built poorly, which is very true of Orlando. I was recently in Holland, and I was trying to explain to Dutch kids the idea of a cul-de-sac. And I got to him, they got that it was round. And they were like, so it's a, what do you call it? It's a roundabout. And I said, no, like, it's like a dead end. And there are houses all around the circle. And they're like, well, why doesn't the road go anywhere? I was thinking, that's a great question. Never occurred to me before, but I have no idea why the road doesn't go anywhere. Orlando is a town like that. It's a town where all of the roads were built to house people, and for really no other reason. They weren't built to go anywhere. They were just built to be something, to house us. That's the first reading of Papertowns. The second is that in Orlando and around Orlando, because there's always been so much crazy real estate bubbles in Florida, there are all these abandoned subdivisions where they built the roads, they built the mailboxes, they built the road signs, but they just never had the money to build the houses. And in fact, there's a famous one that Colombian drug lords use as a runway. And they were eventually caught doing this. the road is so long in this half-built subdivision that they would fly the drugs in, land on the road, empty the drugs out, and then fly away again on the road. That's not in the book. Should have been. Should have probably used that. Then the third reading, the last reading of Papertowns, is that there's this weird phenomenon in cartography. Before I talk about that, though, I want to tell you that I am looking forward to how good your questions are about to be. And I know that you are looking forward to it, too. I just glanced at my fly, and you might wonder why, and I'm going to tell you. I did this thing in San Francisco a couple months ago. A few of you know this story. And I keep having like post-traumatic stress disorder about it. What happened was I was talking to a group of high school students for about 45 minutes, and I don't want to brag, but I was on fire. They were laughing a lot, and they seemed to really like me, and I just felt a real great connection with the audience. It was going really well, and then I felt like this was going pretty well, and then that's why I had to glance at my fly. So then I said, are there any questions? And like 60 hands went up, which is like 58 more than have ever gone up in my entire career. And I was very pleased with myself, and I was like, boy, John Green, you sure do have them. And I called on someone, and they said, Mr. Green, are you aware that your fly is down? And I turned around. And I turned back around. That, by the way, when I was turning around was the worst 3 seconds of my life. And then I turned back around and I said, are there any other questions? Nothing. No, it worked out fine. I mean, you know. Oh God, it was horrible. So anyway, I'm still working my way through that. So the last meaning of Papertowns is this. There's this weird phenomenon in cartography. When map makers make a map, they will often insert fake things, like a fake town or a fake street, or they'll intentionally transpose letters in the name of a street or something. And they do this so that if someone else makes a map with that same mistake, they will know that those people plagiarized them, right? Because you can't have, if you have a fake town on your map that's identical to the fake town on my map, I know that you stole my map. This was very popular in the days of paper maps, but Google Maps still does it. And if you're a gigantic nerd and you have Google Earth, you will sometimes see little alleys in cities where if you look at the satellite, there's clearly no alley. And they do that to, I would think, to protect their copyright. So anyway, in the 1930s, there was this company called General Drafting that made up one of these towns. They're called Papertowns. Made up one of these towns called Agloe, New York. And it was right below the Catskills at the intersection of two dirt roads near a village called Roscoe. 30 years later, Rand McNally makes a map, and Agloe, New York is on the map. So General Drafting calls up Rand McNally and says, you plagiarized, we can prove it, you are so in trouble, you're doomed, we're going to take all your money. And Rand McNally says, no, dude, Agloe, I don't know if they said dude. No, Agloe is real. In the intervening 30 years, people went to that intersection of two dirt roads so much looking for a place that finally someone built one. And they made it real. And that to me is the power of story and the power of text, is that when we can put new things on our map, we can imagine things into our maps, and we can make them real in time. And that's why I write books, and that's why I'm so grateful. It's also why I read books, and it's why I'm so grateful to have, in the Nerdfighter community and outside of it as well, so many readers who read that way, who read to populate their maps with worlds that might be more interesting and more beautiful than the world that they live in today. So now I will take your questions.